The facility wasn't on any map, and the people who built it made sure it stayed that way. The first time Ava Rourke saw the gate, she thought she'd found the wrong road. The map on her phone showed nothing but a thin gray line cutting through scrubland and winter-burnt pine outside the high desert. No labels, no landmarks, just the kind of back road you took when you didn't want to be seen. The kind you didn't stumble onto by accident. Ava killed the headlights and rolled the truck forward on idle. The night was moonless, the sky a stretched black tarp studded with cold stars. Ahead, the road ended at chain link topped with razor wire, and beyond it rose a second fence, then a third, layered security like a warning written in metal. There was no sign, no federal property, no restricted area, just a matte black gatehouse with windows that reflected nothing and a pair of cameras mounted like watchful eyes. Ava's hands tightened on the wheel. Her knuckles looked pale in the dash glow, the only light she allowed herself. She'd been here before, years ago, but not like this. Not alone. Not as someone trying to break in. Back then, she'd been part of a team with a name that didn't appear on paperwork. They didn't wear unit patches. They didn't take photos. They were told what mattered and what didn't. The rest was noise. They called the place the Annex. It had other names too. Names whispered as jokes in hallways with no windows. The Black Library. The Tomb. The Vault. Officially, it did not exist. Ava parked 100 yards back in a shallow dip and sat still, listening. The wind carried faint electrical hum. The world felt too quiet, the way it did before a breach, when your body knew something was about to happen and your mind was still catching up. She checked her watch. 1:17. Then she pulled a folded paper from her jacket pocket, smoothed it over her thigh, and read the words she'd memorized 100 times anyway. Keep your promise. She didn't know who had written it. It had arrived in a plain envelope 2 weeks ago at a mailbox she only used when she didn't want a trail. No return address. No fingerprint. Just that line and a single set of coordinates. Ava had tried to ignore it at first. She'd burned the paper. She'd told herself it was bait. A setup. Someone fishing for the last living thread of a unit that was supposed to have disappeared into civilian life. But the coordinates had been too specific. And something deep in her chest, the part that had never truly uncoiled after the war, had tightened around the message like a hook. Keep your promise. Ava had made a lot of promises in her life. Most of them didn't survive contact with reality. But one did. She got out of the truck, the air biting immediately. She wore dark layers, no reflective tape, no jangling gear. A small pack hugged her back. Her hair was tucked into a beanie. She looked like any other person who didn't want to be found. She moved down the ditch line toward the fence. The annex had been built like a fortress, but no fortress was perfect. The weakest part of any system was the part built by humans. Humans got lazy. Humans assumed no one would come. Humans believed their own secrets were too large to be threatened. Ava believed something else. Secrets weren't safe. They were just unchallenged. She reached the first fence and dropped low, scanning. Camera sweep. Infrared. Motion detection. The old pattern, left to right, pause, reset. The rhythm of a machine that didn't expect improvisation. She waited for the sweep, then moved. The fence wasn't meant to be climbed. It was meant to be approached and feared. But Ava had climbed worse. She slid a compact tool from her pocket, clipped a section, and eased a gap wide enough to slip through without tearing fabric. Under the fence, the ground was packed and clean, dirt raked smooth like a blank page. To show footprints. To show intent. Ava stepped where she'd stepped before, along the concrete seam that ran beneath the dirt, leaving no impression. She'd learned that trick from an old instructor with weathered hands and a voice like gravel. Don't fight the system, he'd said. Use what it forgets. The second fence was heavier, electrified, but its power box sat near a junction node on the left side. Older infrastructure, probably installed before the newer layers. Ava watched the camera sweep again. She counted the seconds between the pause and the reset. Then she crossed. The power box wasn't a hack. It wasn't a code. It was a simple vulnerability, a maintenance latch that required a key no one bothered to change because no one believed anyone without the key would ever be here. Ava wasn't anyone. She worked the latch with quiet pressure until it clicked. Inside, a nest of wires and switches. She didn't cut power completely. That would trigger alerts. Instead, she used a bypass to briefly loop the circuit. A 10-second blind spot. Just enough. She slid under the second fence as the wire's hum faded and returned. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the old familiar surge. The pure clarity that came when the mission was active and everything else was background. The third fence was the last. Ava approached it like it might speak. Beyond it, the annex rose from the earth like a bunker half-buried. Concrete walls curved and reinforced. The building had no windows, only thick blast doors and a few service entries. A ventilation tower stood to one side like a chimney for a monster that breathed secrets instead of smoke. Ava's old access route was the service tunnel. She moved along the fence line until she found the maintenance hatch, flush with the ground, disguised with gravel. It had a keypad, but the code wasn't the problem. The problem was that she shouldn't know the code anymore. Yet the numbers were still in her mind, etched like a scar. She entered them. The keypad flashed green. The hatch unlocked with a soft thud that sounded too loud in the still night. Ava lifted it and dropped into darkness. The tunnel smelled like concrete, dust, and something faintly chemical. Her boots found rungs of a ladder leading down. She descended, sealed the hatch above her, and stood in the black, the kind of black that didn't belong outside. It belonged underground. She took out a small light and clicked it on, a narrow beam. The hallway ahead was lined with pipes and conduits. Security sensors dotted the ceiling like tiny insects. Ava breathed slowly. She moved. The annex had been built for storage, not comfort. It was a mausoleum for things that were never meant to be seen again. When she'd served, her role had been to bring things in, not take them out. To deliver hard drives, evidence, reports, recorded statements, ghosts in digital form. She followed the corridor to a door marked only by a numeric stamp. No name, no label. She used her old access card. Yes, she still had it, sealed in plastic and hidden in a place only desperation would reach. It slid through the reader. The door clicked. Ava stepped inside. The room was colder than the hallway, temperature-controlled. Rows of shelves held sealed cases, each stamped with classifications that made the air feel heavier. TS/Psi, no foreign, Recon, eyes only. And then the one that mattered most. Black, special access program. Ava stared at the shelves like they were a cemetery of choices. For years, she'd tried to convince herself that what happened over there, what she'd seen, what she'd been ordered to do, was a necessary kind of ugly. That leadership, even when flawed, was still trying to steer a ship through a storm. But the envelope had cracked that illusion. Keep your promise. A promise to who? Ava stepped deeper into the room, scanning case labels. Her light caught a familiar code, OP Hawk Glass. Then another, Op Silent Anchor. Names she remembered from briefings that came with warnings. And then she saw it. The ledger, archival composite / field loss events. Her throat tightened. The ledger was something soldiers joked about in whispers, a mythical file that held the truth behind awards and speeches. Behind why certain missions succeeded on paper while men came home in bags. Ava had never believed it was real. Until now. She moved to the shelf, fingers hovering, then gripping the case. It was heavier than she expected. Not physically, emotionally. Because the moment she opened it, she would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She would become something the system could not tolerate. Not an operator, not a veteran, not a loyal silence. A threat. Ava set the case on a metal table and unlatched it. Inside were drives. Hard drives. Old ones, new ones, each labeled with dates and operations. A thick envelope of printed documents lay on top. She opened the envelope. The first page wasn't a report. It was a list. Names. Ava's breath caught. Some she recognized, some she didn't. And next to each name was a note, not in military language, but in plain, blunt words. Denied extraction, political optics. Delayed air support, command decision. Rerouted convoy, public relations timing. After action rewritten, credit shifted. Ava's hands trembled. She flipped pages, reading faster. Each entry was a dagger. A mission she'd been told was unavoidable. A rescue she'd been told was impossible. A delay she'd been told was due to weather. But here, in black ink, were the real reasons. Not weather. Not equipment. Not enemy. Leadership. And the worst part wasn't the mistakes. It was the pattern. Mistakes repeated. Mistakes concealed. Mistakes rewarded. Ava's eyes burned, and she realized she was clenching her jaw so hard it hurt. She forced herself to breathe. This is why it was hidden. Not because it endangered national security. Because it endangered reputations. She reached for a drive labeled with a date that made her stomach drop. For years ago, the year her unit had suffered its worst loss. The year she'd been medically discharged after an operation that wasn't supposed to exist left her with shrapnel scars and a mind that woke up to phantom radio chatter. Ava slid the drive into a reader. The screen on her small laptop flickered to life. A folder opened. Inside was a video file with a timestamp that felt like a punch. She clicked it. The footage showed a grainy aerial view of a valley, men moving through it like ants. Audio crackled in the background, radio calls, stress, urgency. Then a voice. A senior officer's voice. Calm. Detached. Hold. Not yet. A younger voice responded, almost pleading. Sir, they're exposed. If we wait. Hold, the senior voice repeated. We can't risk optics. We need the timing clean. Then the ambush hit. Explosions. Screams. Chaos. Ava watched, frozen, as the men on screen, men she'd trained with, laughed with, were shredded by a decision made far above their heads. She slammed the laptop shut. The room seemed to tilt. Ava's chest felt too tight for air. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't anger. This was evidence. And evidence was dangerous. She sat down hard, elbows on the table, hands pressed to her face. She didn't cry. Not because she couldn't, but because she'd trained herself not to waste water inside her body. Old habit. War habit. Instead, she whispered, You did this. Not to the dead. To the living. The people who'd made decisions and then pinned medals on their own suits for surviving consequences they'd never stood close enough to smell. Ava took her hands down. Her gaze was steel now. She reopened the laptop and began copying files. One drive at a time. She wasn't here to steal everything. That would be too slow, too loud, too impossible. She was here to take what mattered most. The pattern, the proof, the truth. She copied until her storage filled, then swapped to another encrypted drive from her pack, labeling each with a simple code. Outside the room, somewhere in the annex, something clicked. A mechanical sound. Ava froze. She turned her light off, holding still in the darkness. Her breath slowed. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears like footsteps. Then she heard it. A door opening in the hallway. Voices. 2 of them. Low, professional. Ava's muscles tensed. They weren't supposed to patrol this deep at night. Unless someone knew she was here. Unless the envelope wasn't a warning. Unless it was a trap. Ava slid beneath the metal table, pulling the case with her, keeping her laptop pressed close. Her mind raced with options. If they entered, she could fight. But fighting here was suicide. The annex was a maze built for containment. She didn't know the new patterns, the new sensors. She waited, motionless. The voices came closer. A flashlight beam cut under the door crack. Then the handle turned. Ava's fingers tightened around the edge of her knife. Not because she wanted to use it, but because it reminded her she still had agency. The door opened. Light flooded the room. 2 men entered in dark uniforms with no patches. Not soldiers. Not police. Internal. The kind of people who clean secrets. One of them spoke into a radio. Sector C, Archive 2 negative. No signs. He turned slowly, scanning the room. Ava held her breath. The other man moved toward the shelf where the ledger case had been. Ava's mind screamed. He reached out, touched the shelf, then frowned. Case seal's intact, he said. Ava's pulse pounded. Because the case seal was intact. She'd been careful. She'd latched it again, wiped it down, left it exactly how it looked before. The system believed in paperwork. It believed in seals. It didn't believe in ghosts. The men scanned a moment longer, then left. The door shut. Silence returned. Ava exhaled slowly, careful not to sound like relief. She waited 3 more minutes, then slid out. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the gravity of what she'd almost become, a corpse in a room full of dead truths. She finished copying the final files. Then she packed. As she sealed the ledger case back into place, her eyes caught a line in the printed pages she hadn't noticed before. Subject: Rourke, Ava, status, monitor. Ava's blood ran cold. They already knew her name. They had her in a file. They had been watching her. She stared at the words, then closed the envelope. Her jaw set. She didn't have the luxury of surprise anymore. She had the truth. Now she had to survive long enough to let the world hear it. Ava didn't go home. Home was where you kept photographs, where you left toothbrushes, where you told yourself you were safe. Home was also where they went first. She drove straight through the night, leaving the desert behind, headlights carving pale tunnels through darkness. Her hands stayed steady, but her mind was a storm. The ledger had not just revealed wrongdoing. It revealed a machine. And machines didn't feel shame. They felt threats. At dawn, Ava parked outside a diner off an interstate that ran along a chain of sleepy towns. She chose it because it was busy enough to disappear in, but ordinary enough to be overlooked. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and fried eggs, and people who didn't know what a secure facility looked like from the inside. Ava sat in a corner booth with her back to the wall, ordered black coffee, and plugged in her phone. No messages. No missed calls. That was worse than a threat. It meant the threat was moving silently. Ava took out her laptop and the encrypted drives, keeping them hidden behind the menu. She began writing. Notes, context, a timeline. Evidence without framing was noise. People saw what they wanted unless you guided them. She created 3 categories. The pattern, decisions that caused preventable losses. The cover, after-action reports rewritten, awards shifted. The winners, names that appeared again and again on the benefited side. The coffee arrived. The waitress, mid-50s, kind eyes, asked if Ava needed anything else. Ava smiled automatically, the way she'd learned to do when pretending life was normal. No, ma'am. Thank you. The waitress paused. Your military? Ava's smile faded a fraction. My boy served, the woman said. He doesn't talk much now. Ava's throat tightened. Yeah. The waitress nodded like she understood more than she said, then walked away. Ava stared at the steam rising from her cup and felt the weight of the ledger settle deeper. This wasn't about revenge. It was about the people who never got to come back and not talk anymore. Ava finished organizing the files and opened her secure messaging app. There was one contact saved without a real name. M. Hart. Miles Hart wasn't a friend. He was a journalist, the kind who didn't chase celebrity scandals. He chased systems. He had written pieces that made agencies furious and people grateful. He had also survived doing it, which meant he knew how to move. Ava typed, I have a classified archive. Proof of preventable battlefield losses plus cover-ups plus awards. Need a drop protocol. No phone calls. Minutes passed. Then the reply. If you're real, you're in danger. Are you alone? Ava stared at the question longer than she should have. Because she didn't know. Not really. Then she typed. Yes. For now. Another pause. Then. Meet at 2100 hours. Public place. Bring nothing you can't burn. I'll send location. Do not go straight there. Ava's jaw tightened. She already wasn't going straight anywhere. She closed her laptop and sipped coffee, scanning the diner. A man at the counter looked at her too long, then looked away. It might have been nothing, but Ava didn't live in might. She left 10 minutes later, drove 3 exits, then doubled back through side roads. She changed her route twice more, then pulled into a small motel with a neon sign that flickered like it had given up hope. Inside the room, she checked the window locks, then sat on the bed and listened. The silence felt false. Ava thought of the annex, the men in unmarked uniforms, the file with her name, monitor. They had started watching before she moved, which meant someone had been waiting for her to crack. Someone had wanted the ledger moved, and someone else had wanted her caught doing it. Ava felt anger rise, hot and sharp, and forced it down. Anger would make her sloppy. She needed cold. She needed discipline. The kind they taught you when you were young and stubborn, and you thought the country was a simple thing. Ava opened her phone again. New message from Miles Hart. Location, Union Station, East Concourse. Bench near the murals. You'll see a vending machine with a taped, out-of-order sign. That's me. Ava stared at the text. Union Station. Crowds. Cameras. That was good and bad. It meant Miles knew how to hide, but it also meant the machine watching her might have chosen the same safety in numbers. She spent the day preparing. She copied the most important subset of files onto a single drive and hid it inside a cheap plastic souvenir keychain she bought at a gas station. If anyone searched her, they'd see nothing but junk. The full archive stayed hidden elsewhere, split into pieces in separate locations, because one failure should not kill the truth. That night, Ava arrived at Union Station 2 hours early. She didn't go inside. She watched from across the street, leaning against a wall like someone waiting for a ride. She scanned faces, patterns, exits. Then she saw something that made her blood freeze. 2 men in dark coats, standing near the entrance, not entering. Watching. They didn't look like commuters. They looked like men who knew how to wait. Ava's heart hammered. She stepped away slowly, blending into a group of tourists. She walked a block, then another, then slipped into a parking structure. Inside, she pressed her back against concrete and breathed. Was it paranoia? Or was it confirmation? Ava opened her phone and typed quickly. Compromised. 2 watchers at entrance. Abort. Miles replied almost instantly. Move. Don't run. New location in 15. Ava swallowed. She moved. She walked out of the structure, crossed with a crowd, stopped at a coffee cart, and ordered a drink she didn't want. She kept her hands steady. Her phone buzzed. Library. Reading room. 2130, 2nd floor. Same protocol. Ava exhaled. The library was calmer, quieter. Safer in a different way. People here didn't watch each other. They watched pages. She entered, scanned security guards, then moved to the 2nd floor. The reading room was large, warm lights spilling over tables like pools. She chose a seat with sight lines to exits. Then she waited. At 2128, a man approached with a book in his hands. He wore glasses. He looked tired in a way that felt real. He sat at her table without asking and opened the book. The taped, out-of-order sign was tucked into his pages. Ava didn't look at him directly. You're late. He turned a page. You're alive. That's a win. Ava's voice was low. They're watching. Miles nodded. They always do when the truth has teeth. You have proof. Ava slid the plastic keychain across the table like it was nothing. A sample. The rest is split. Miles's fingers paused for a fraction before he took it. Smart. Ava stared at the book, not reading. If you publish, they'll come for you. Miles gave a humorless smile. They already have. Ava's jaw tightened. Then why do it? Miles looked at her, and the tiredness in his eyes sharpened into something else. Something steady. Because if we don't, he said softly, the dead stay dead twice. Ava swallowed. Miles closed the book. I need context. Names, timelines, a narrative. Evidence alone doesn't move people. A story does. Ava's fingers curled around the edge of the table. The story is leadership made decisions for optics and then rewarded themselves. Miles nodded. We'll prove it. Carefully. We'll protect sources. But you need to understand, this will not end with a headline. Ava didn't blink. I know. Miles leaned in slightly. They will try to bury you with legal threats. They'll call you unstable. They'll call you a traitor. They'll claim you fabricated everything. They might try to break you quietly. Ava's voice was flat. Let them. Miles studied her. That bravado, lose it. Survive first. Justice comes after survival. Ava stared at him. Then she nodded once, slow. Miles slid the keychain into his pocket. I'll contact you through dead drop only. No direct messaging. Ava's stomach tightened. And what do I do? Miles's voice was calm. You disappear in plain sight. And you prepare for the moment they realize they can't control the narrative anymore. Ava watched him stand and walk away, leaving her alone with the heavy silence of books and the faint scent of paper. For the first time since the annex, Ava felt something close to hope. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. We know what you took. Return it. Ava's blood ran cold. Then another message followed. A picture. A photo of her truck. Taken from behind. With the motel sign in the background. They had been there. They were already close. Ava stood slowly, the library's warm light suddenly feeling like a lie. The war after the war had begun. Ava slept in 10-minute pieces. She changed vehicles twice in 3 days. She didn't use credit cards. She didn't stay in one place long enough to be remembered. She moved like someone who had learned that safety was never a location, it was motion. At the same time, the pressure tightened. A veteran friend called her, voice shaky. Ava, 2 guys came by my place. Asked about you. Said it was urgent and for your protection. Ava's stomach clenched. What did you say? I said I hadn't heard from you, her friend whispered. But, Ava, they had your file. Your discharge notes. They knew things. Ava's jaw hardened. Don't answer unknown numbers. Don't open the door for anyone you don't know. If someone asks, you haven't seen me. The friend's voice cracked. What did you do? Ava closed her eyes. I'm trying to do something right. The friend didn't respond for a moment. Then, be careful. Ava hung up and stared at her phone. They weren't just watching her. They were isolating her. Classic. Cut the subject off from support, make her feel alone, then offer safety in exchange for silence. Ava refused. Still, refusing didn't make her bulletproof. On the 5th day, as she walked out of a small grocery store with a plastic bag of water and protein bars, she noticed a sedan parked too far back to be convenient. The engine was off. The windows were tinted. It didn't move. Ava's heart rate didn't spike. It cooled. Focus sharpened. She walked past her truck as if she hadn't noticed. She turned into the next aisle between parked cars, then slipped into a row and crouched. She waited. Footsteps. 2 sets. Measured. Not hurried. Ava's mouth went dry. She shifted silently between cars, moving toward the far exit. The footsteps tracked. They were good. Not amateurs. Ava reached the corner of the lot and saw another figure. This one approaching from the other side. A pincer. Ava's pulse hit her throat. No. Not here. Not now. She turned and walked directly toward the sedan. A bold move, but bold didn't mean stupid. It meant choosing the direction of impact. She lifted her phone as she walked, camera open, recording. The sedan's door opened. A man stepped out. Dark coat. No badge. Calm face. Ava Rourke, he said like it was a greeting. Ava kept her voice steady. Who are you? He smiled slightly. Someone who can keep you safe if you make the right choice. Ava held up her phone. I'm recording. The man didn't care. We're not here to harm you. Ava's eyes narrowed. You're here to harm my life. The man's expression didn't change. Return what you took. No one needs to get hurt. Ava's voice sharpened. People already got hurt. That's the point. He stepped closer, hands open. You don't understand what you're holding. Ava laughed once, bitter. I understand exactly what I'm holding. Proof. His tone hardened. You're holding classified material. Ava's gaze was steel. I'm holding dead men's names and the reasons they died. The man's eyes flickered. For the first time, a crack. Then he spoke carefully. There are channels for grievances. Ava's voice cut. Grievances? You call mass casualties a grievance? He stepped closer again. Ava. Ava raised her phone higher. Stop. People in the lot were starting to look. A woman pushing a cart paused. A teenager watched. The man glanced around, calculating. He lowered his voice. If you release that, you'll destroy people who serve this country. Ava's lips curled. No. I'll destroy people who used it. The man's eyes sharpened. Last warning. Ava's stomach twisted, but her voice stayed flat. You should have warned them. The man stared at her for a long moment, then stepped back. Fine, he said softly. You'll learn. He turned and walked away. The second figure melted back into the lot like smoke. Ava stood still, shaking, not with fear, but with rage and adrenaline. Then her phone buzzed again. A message from Miles. Publish window in 72 hours. Congressional staff contacted. Stay alive. Ava exhaled. 72 hours. She had to survive 3 more days. 3 days while the machine realized that containment was failing. Ava drove west into a small city where she'd once trained. She rented a storage unit under a false name and moved her split archive into a more secure arrangement. Then she did something that felt like stepping into sunlight. She told someone else. Not the full story. Just enough. A retired colonel she trusted. One of the rare ones who'd never chased a medal. He listened without interrupting, face unreadable. When Ava finished, he took a long breath and stared at the table. Then he said quietly, I always suspected, but I never had proof. Ava's voice was low. Will you help? The colonel's eyes lifted to hers. You're not just fighting a person, Ava. You're fighting institutional survival. Ava nodded. I know. The colonel leaned forward. Then we do this clean. We make it impossible to smear you as a rogue. Ava's pulse steadied. How? She asked. He tapped the table with one finger. We document your process. We show you tried lawful routes. We show you aren't reckless. We show you are principled. Ava frowned. Principle won't stop them. The colonel's mouth tightened. It won't stop them, but it will rally the right people when they try. Ava swallowed. For the first time, she felt the outline of something bigger than survival. A plan. The story broke on a Tuesday. It didn't hit like a bomb at first. Bombs were loud. People looked up, then went back to their lives. This hit like water rising. Slow, persistent, unstoppable. Miles Hart published the first piece at 6 o'clock. The headline was clean, restrained, almost too restrained. Classified archive reveals pattern of preventable combat losses and after-action alterations. Inside were documents, audio clips, names redacted where necessary, but patterns clear. A senior officer's voice ordering a delay for optics. A timeline showing when air support could have arrived and when it was withheld. The public reaction came in waves. At first, confusion. Then, anger. Then, something else, recognition. Veterans sharing their own stories. Families asking questions. People who had always suspected something wasn't right suddenly seeing it printed in black and white. By noon, it was everywhere. By evening, the government issued a statement. We take these allegations seriously. We cannot comment on classified operational details. An internal review is underway. The statement meant nothing, because now people knew something had been hidden. And nothing triggers a nation's curiosity like the scent of concealed truth. The next day, Miles published Part 2, the awards. How commendations had been reassigned. How citations omitted crucial details. How certain names appeared repeatedly in leadership credits, while field operators were reduced to footnotes. The outrage sharpened. A committee announced hearings. A senator on camera said, if this is real, heads should roll. A general retired on live television and called it a betrayal. Ava watched from a motel room with the curtains drawn. Her phone buzzed constantly. Messages from old teammates, veterans she didn't know, strangers thanking her without knowing her name. Then a different message arrived. Unknown number. You've made your point. Meet. We can make this go away. Ava stared at the words until they blurred. Make this go away. The machine still believed it could negotiate reality. Ava deleted the message. She didn't respond. Instead, she sent a single secure note to Miles. I'm willing to testify if protected. The reply came quickly. They'll try to break you publicly. Are you ready? Ava looked at her reflection in the motel mirror. Tired eyes, old scars, a face that had seen things no one applauded. She whispered to herself, I didn't come this far to hide. Then she typed, yes. The colonel arranged the rest. Within a week, Ava sat behind a closed door in a secure room with legal counsel, congressional staff, and an investigator who didn't smile. They asked questions for hours. Ava answered without drama. Dates, times, locations, names. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't perform. She spoke like someone who had carried silence long enough and finally set it down. The investigator listened, then said, You understand you're risking everything. Ava's voice was calm. They risked everything for optics. Silence followed. 2 weeks later, the hearings began. Television cameras lined the hallways. Reporters shouted questions. The country watched like it was a trial, because it was. Not a legal one at first, but a moral one. Ava testified under her name. She did not wear a uniform. She wore a plain dark jacket and sat upright, hands folded. A senator asked her, Why did you take classified material? Ava looked him in the eye. Because it wasn't being used to protect the country. It was being used to protect careers. Another asked, Are you claiming leadership intentionally sacrificed troops? Ava's jaw tightened. I'm claiming leadership made preventable decisions, then hid those decisions, then rewarded themselves. The room shifted. That was the sentence that cut through politics, through noise, through spin. Preventable decisions. Hidden. Rewarded. A retired general testified next, backing key elements. A former analyst confirmed the existence of altered reports. A grieving mother held a photo of her son and said, I want the truth. And the machine that had once been airtight began to leak from every seam. Not everyone faced justice. Ava never believed everyone would. Systems protected themselves. That was their nature. But some did. An investigation led to resignations. One high-ranking official lost his post. Another was stripped of a commendation. A formal apology was issued, thin but real. A new policy was enacted. Independent review of certain battlefield decisions. Not perfect, but a crack in the wall. Ava watched it unfold and felt something she hadn't expected. Not triumph. Relief. Because the truth hadn't just escaped the vault. It had changed the air outside it. Months later, Ava stood on a hill overlooking a veteran's cemetery. The wind was mild, the sky wide. She held a small folded paper in her pocket, the same kind that had started everything. Keep your promise. Ava looked at the rows of markers, quiet names, quiet dates, and spoke softly. I didn't fix it, she said, but I didn't let them keep it buried. Behind her, footsteps approached. Miles' heart stopped beside her, hands in his coat pockets. They're still angry, he said. Ava's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Let them be. Miles nodded toward the cemetery. Did it feel worth it? Ava didn't answer quickly. Worth it was a word people used when the cost had an ending. For her, it didn't. But she thought of the families who now had answers. She thought of the soldiers whose names would no longer be used as slogans without context. She thought of the machine, forced, just slightly, to change its gears. She exhaled. Yes, she said finally. Because now they can't pretend they don't know. Miles looked at her, quiet respect in his eyes. What now? Ava stared out over the markers. Now, she said. I live long enough to make sure they don't rewrite it again. The wind moved through the grass like a whisper. And somewhere far away, in a facility that did not exist, the vault remained sealed. But its contents were no longer a secret. Not really. Because once truth was seen, even once, it never fully returned to darkness. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Epic Recon Stories. Here we tell the missions that never made the headlines, the decisions made in silence, and the people who carried them. More stories are coming soon.